The Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Mid Carolina Service Company.
Mid Carolina Service Company is the first name to search for your residential or commercial HVAC needs in Lexington and surrounding areas.
Just go holler at Jason and Clint. They'll hook you up on the air conditioners, on the restaurant equipment, refrigerators, refrigeration, ice machine repair. They've been doing this for years. I know them cats forever.
Family owned and operated since 2006, they pride themselves in their quality work and customer relationships. Call 803-356-4153 or visit midcarolinaserviceco.com for a no obligation quote for service today.
The Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by True Brilliance Entertainment.
True Brilliance is a production, promotions, and management company dedicated to connecting artists and producers across the Carolinas to music industry professionals.
Several of their clients have placements both domestic and internationally as a result of their services.
Are you an artist or producer looking to build meaningful relationships within the music industry? Then True Brilliance is for you. Check them out at paramilitary.com. That's spelled P-A-I-R-A military.com.
This episode of the Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Bob's. Bob's is a Columbia-based retailer of over 100 Black-owned products from 20 Black-owned businesses. Bob's offers a wide range of items from household cleaning, cosmetics, and everything in between. With every visit to Bob's, you support Black-owned businesses, giving them the opportunity to grow and establish connections with our community. Bob's is located inside the Noma warehouse at 2222 Sumter Street in Columbia, South Carolina. Visit their website, weshopbobs.com for in-store pickup or to find out more. Bob's can also be found via social media on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at weshopbobs. When you stop by, tell them the Hilltop Glove sent you. Bob's brings quality Black brands to the Columbia community. The Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Red Rooster Sports Bar and Grill. Red Rooster is your neighborhood bar and grill serving the best wings, burgers, and baskets in the Met.
Like the amazing food, the bar is always on tap, and there's plenty of screens to watch the big game. Red Rooster is the Midland's premier meetup spot for local car and bike clubs, fraternities, and sororities.
Staff is dedicated to accommodating all kinds of parties and events. If you're looking to catch a game, have a bite, and a drink, look no further than the Red Rooster.
Red Rooster is located at 7500 Wilson Boulevard, Columbia, South Carolina. For more information, visit redroostersportsbar.com or visit them on Facebook and Instagram at Red Rooster Sports Bar. Go where the winners go.
Welcome to the Hilltop Glove Podcast.
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 Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Hilltop Glove Podcast. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Shari Dade. Shari is a Columbia, South Carolina-based psychologist, wellness consultant, and motivational speaker. She earned her PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and enjoys working with community organizations that focus on trauma, depression, anxiety, and lifestyle transitions. Dr. Dade currently works to facilitate integration between mental health and holistic wellness. In 2017, she developed Everyday Psychology, LLC, a consulting organization that believes psychology can be value for everyday people and works better when it spans outside our four office walls. She serves as a key consultant and that fosters wellness and healing by educating through interactive workshops, group and individual wellness consultations, and community wellness seminars. How are you today, Ms. Shari?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Your voice is so soft-spoken. Like you making me feel so like
you're already in Zen, right?
I can tell that you talk to people for a living.
Yeah.
No, seriously, it was calming.
I love it. Thank you. And that's kind of, I actually work with Shari at Aspire Wellness. So I'm around her energy all the time, and I really enjoy your presence. I have to say thank you for just
Well,
being who you are. So that's why I wanted you to be a part of this episode.
oh yeah, thank you. No, I've enjoyed working with you, getting to know you as well. And so this is a huge, huge privilege to be a part of you guys' episodes. I've listened to a couple, so I definitely am a fan. So happy to be here.
That's happy. We love to hear that. So I know a little bit about you, but can you tell the audience who Dr. Shari Dade is and how did you get to where you are today?
Absolutely. So, yes, Dr. Shari, like you said in the bio, just a licensed psychologist, key consultant for everyday psychology. Outside of all of those things, I like to think of myself as a healer by all means. I say our society calls it psychologist, but I have been called to do the work that I am doing. A little bit about me. I am originally from Louisiana and I've been in South Carolina for about 7 years now. I can't believe it's like coming up on like almost 8 at this point. Time moves by so quickly. But yep, from the deep South, from Louisiana, from a very, very small town called Shudrent, Louisiana. Most people have never heard of it. I don't get offended by that, but very small town. And as you can guess, in our small town, we didn't talk about mental health and mental wellness and mental illness and all of those things that is a part of the human experience and human condition much. And so when I was first introduced to psychology in middle school, it really piqued my interest. I've always been drawn to people and just being able to understand the behaviors of people, why people do what they do and why people don't do what they don't do. And so psychology was kind of a North Star guiding me through that understanding. I didn't really know exactly what psychology was. Like I said, I was introduced in middle school and I didn't really fully understand the full spectrum of psychology. I just knew that it was like you get paid to talk to people. And so I was like, oh, I like talking. I like people. Let me see if I could do this. And so I started to study it a little bit more. And that brought me to kind of where I am today. I feel like I have taken the term psychology or the field of psychology and really created and crafted something that is based in the work that I love to do with groups and with communities. And so that kind of led me to here to South Carolina in a short story. But yeah, that got me to where I am right now.
That's amazing. So, as a child, we dream of what we want to be when we grow up. What influenced you to choose this career path? Was this always your dream, or did you dream of being in another field, a profession?
Yeah. So when I was young, I know this is this like, what did you want to be in kindergarten? When I was young, I actually wanted to be an astronomer. And I realized, I know, right? I wanted to, because I loved, like I said, I grew up in a really small town. So we had like front view to the stars and all of those different things in the solar system. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into that. I wanted to study it. And then I realized how much math was a part of that career. And I was like, no, right. You know what? That is not for me. You got to know thyself, know your strengths and know your areas of growth. And so math is definitely an area of growth for me. So I'm very happy I didn't put myself through that. But I knew in the 7th grade that I wanted to be a psychologist. And usually when I tell people that, they're like, really? In the 7th grade? Like I wasn't thinking about like psychology in the 7th grade. But I definitely wanted to go into psychology for all the wrong reasons. So I heard a teacher of mine say that she was going to her psychologist in class, which she probably shouldn't have told 7th graders.
I don't know. I heard that open about mental health is like kind of a new thing, Oh, my teacher's got a psychologist. Oh, I'm good.
Not in the 90s, I'm aging myself, right? But definitely not in the 90s. But I heard her say that she was paying like $150 an hour. And I got like childhood hypnotized by the dollar signs. And I was like, that's what I want to do. So maybe I didn't get into the field for the right reasons because I definitely am not making $150 an hour. Didn't know about insurance companies and all of that. But I really at that point decided that, I really want to be able to study like people, because I really enjoyed it, like I said before. And so from there, I started to take classes as I got into high school. We had like AP classes that we could choose different things that weren't typically offered in our curriculum. So I started to take psychology classes, went into undergrad knowing that I wanted to major in psychology and sociology. So I was a double major in both of those fields of study. Enjoyed the mix of both. So focusing in on that individual, but really loved focusing in on that group, which kind of led me into wanting to do a little bit of work in community spaces. So did that in undergrad, absolutely loved that experience, loved the research side of it. And I was going to be a researcher. And then I did a couple of summer internship programs where I would do like 10 weeks of research in different states. So in Chicago and Minnesota and all of these different places. And I realized that as a researcher, you don't get to talk to people as much. You're kind of stuck in these rooms with all this data and all of that. And so that brought me into more of the practical side of psychology, more of like when we think about psychology, like therapy and things of that nature. So went into doing some psychology in grad school and enjoyed it so much, enjoyed humans, like enjoyed hearing stories, enjoyed people being able to take me on their journeys. So, I truly believe that humans are fascinating. Even more like the lives and the stories of humans are extremely fascinating. So I carry this true appreciation for, this complicated task of like diving into the human condition. And I carry a huge appreciation for people allowing me to do that with them, allowing me to walk beside them through some of their most terrifying, some of their most loving or funny or devastating or difficult experience. I consider it an extreme honor. And so that is kind of what led me into this work. So after I gave up the dream of, studying the stars, I definitely walked into my dream of studying humans, which kind of is the same, right? It's kind of like studying the stars,
Yeah, we're made up of the stars.
Exactly.
We are the universe exploring itself.
Yep. Right. So a mix of all of that. So I found my dream in psychology.
That's pretty cool. So you kind of answered the next question, but that just made me think of another question. So being a psychologist, what is it like in your family? Do people like come to you and just assume you have all the answers?
I have trained my family well. They no longer come to me with assuming I have all the answers. But there are times like my family, they do come to me with a lot of different concerns that they may be going through, which is really, really cool because like I said at first, I didn't grow up, like we didn't talk about mental health. We didn't talk about mental illness. We didn't talk about this. Yeah, like it just wasn't a part of our realities. Exactly. Yeah. And so now, like having the opportunity to talk with family members who are experiencing their own mental health concerns, right? The fact that they even acknowledge it, right? And then the fact that they tell me about it is really awesome. It's really fascinating. So they don't necessarily come to me and say like, I want you to fix it. Not anymore. At first it was a little bit of that, but now it's more of, hey, can you share some resources with me? Which I think is the role of psychology. It's about empowering people. So I never decide that I'm the expert in anybody's lives, not enough to fix them, right? So I'm not a Shari fix your life type of person. I am more of like, let me help you and like empower or give you your power back so that you can manage and navigate your own challenges so that you feel like you are able to do that in the future. And so family come to me, they ask a lot about different resources. I try to give them as much resources as I can. And, that's something that I've really enjoyed kind of on the backside of the work that I do.
Yeah, that's very important, the idea of resources to be able to help yourself. Because I kind of really feel like the mental health field is kind of about us acknowledging that we're not just consciousness is a long foot a ride, and that we can do things, actions that we can do that can modify our experience and help us through some of this and change the way we experience our lives. Even if we can't do anything about the actual situations we're in, we can feel different about it.
No, I totally agree with that. I think when we are talking about psychology, we often think about mental illness. And if we think about it only in that one-dimensional way, not everyone struggles or is challenged by mental illness, but everyone has mental health, right? Just like everyone has physical health. It's like everyone has physical wellness. Everyone has mental health. And so if we think about it as this continuum of something that we all possess, then it really does allow us to exist in a way that says, what actions or what behaviors can I take to move myself forward on that continuum? What things am I doing to make me move backwards on that continuum? So it really just allows us, like you said, to allow ourselves to see we don't just exist in the stream of consciousness. Like we actually have the power to decide how we exist in this stream and what that looks like and feels like for us each and every day.
I have a quick question for you, Dr. Dade. And I know we were kind of glossing around this, but our little generation, especially us little millennials, but we've done a better job than those in the past of normalizing conversation and talk around mental health. And I just wonder, like, especially as somebody in your profession, do you think it has eased your job or your ability to be sought out by others? Like, have you seen a change from when you were in your youth wanting to be in this field and now in the youth surrounding the field?
Yeah, I would say yes and no, as a true psychologist would, right? Depends.
Changes for some, not for others.
Yep.
I would say yes because psychology has been I won't say psychology, I'll say mental health, because sometimes we blur those lines. But because mental health has gotten a spotlight in a lot of different ways, a lot of different communities, on TV, it's on TikTok videos, all of these different things, I think it has really pulled some of that stigma down, being able to talk about what you're experiencing and to normalize it in a way that allows you to feel safe enough to talk about what you're experiencing, I think is an amazing thing that we haven't experienced before when it comes to mental health. And so this is a very new thing, which I think is pushing the field forward. But I also think that those outlets of talking about mental health are often more shallow than need be, and sometimes that can do harm. So on TikTok,
could you elaborate? Elaborate.
On TikTok, they don't talk about how difficult therapy is. Like, therapy's not easy, or on TV shows, we'll see someone go to 2 sessions and then they're great. And it doesn't
That is not how it works.
It is not how it works. Like, therapy is dirty. It's hard. It's trying. People want to quit. Like, it is really a fight for your life, right? It is really a fight for your livelihood and your wellness. It's not as simple as someone just listening to you and, they say one great sentence and now your life is changed. And so I think oftentimes that shallow view of mental health and wellness and psychology sets people up for expectations that aren't always what pairs with reality. And so I really enjoy when both of those things are coupled, right? So you have this open discussion about mental health, and then you have people being honest about therapy is hard. Change is extremely hard. It's trying, and it really does shake the core of who you are, who you believe yourself to be. And so I think that yes and no, it's like, yes, it's helping us get out there and people talk about it, but it's not always showing kind of a true portrayal of the work that you really have to put into when you are really, like I said, fighting for change and fighting for your life.
So it's like a form or version like pop psychiatry.
Yes. Oh yeah,
Gotcha.
it's a lot of pop psychiatry, pop psychology out there, which has its place. I think that, everybody likes to see a dancing psychologist every once in a while on TikTok. It may cause someone to actually look into, I don't know, depression or anxiety. But I do think we do an injustice when we don't talk about the work that you really have to do when you are in this space of change, when you are in this space of growth. It doesn't come easy, but it can come, and so
Yeah.
I think, we got to add some depth to the breadth of talking about it.
And what are some good, and this is just a good thing. So, because all right, so you're talking about these misconceptions and these, like I said, pop psychiatry and pop psychology. Are there some resources or things that are accessible that do the inverse of that people could reach out to and receive information from?
Absolutely. There's so many different organizations that really do put out really good resources around mental health and mental illness. I often tell people, if you see something on Instagram or Facebook, or if you see something on TikTok or hear a podcast, right? If you hear all of these things, like, don't just stop right there. If it piques your interest, then that's perfect. Go in and do a little bit more research for yourself. So organizations like NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, they have, so I'm a board member on Columbia's branch of NAMI. And here locally, we do a lot of different events, and we have different community groups that focus in on the education around mental health and mental wellness. So on their website, so if you're not in Columbia, there is usually chapters across the nation. So you can go on the website, www.nami.org, and you'll see different resources. So for instance, if you're interested in looking up depression or anxiety or postpartum depression or anything, isolation and all of these different things that we experience as humans, you can type that in on their website. It'll give you resources that you can read through, that you can learn for yourself what this might be and what this might look like. You can find different professionals in your area that could be useful in helping you with diagnosing these things, because I do see people doing a lot of self-diagnosing, which isn't always correct. And so you want to make sure that you've got the right diagnosis before you start like interventions with things. But, there's a lot of different places. The CDC has resources. I know that's some people are a fan of the CDC right now and not.
CDC right now,
they do have really good mental health resources, right?
Good.
So they do have that. Take those for sure. And then, there's different, just like local resources that people can find in their own area that might have different educational standpoints. So I often say with pop psychology, you want to take it a step further. It's not all bad, but don't just look at the face value of it. Go a little deeper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the key things is that, like, we all have these distortions about who we are and what our real nature is. And part of this is that, maybe there's parts of us that we are not so much a fan of. And so we try to say that that's not us. But, if it is still there, then we have to hide it from ourselves so that little ego doesn't get bruised. And so a lot of times when we're really digging into this stuff, it's kind of like you're punching yourself in the face, because you're finding out stuff about yourself that you ain't really want to pay attention to. And it's work. Yeah.
It's a lot of work. I think, we do so many mental Olympics, right? And I often say therapy is freeing. It teaches you and it shows you all the parts of yourself, the parts that you like, the parts that you don't like, the parts that you approve of, you may not approve of. It doesn't take those things away, but it does enlighten you about why they're there, right? When you understand why something is happening or how something came to be, oftentimes you are a little bit nicer to it. And so it encourages you to look at all of those pieces of who you are and integrate those into who you would like to become, right? So parts of who I am, I tend to have will say I tend to have an addictive personality. That's something that I know about myself. That's something that, I can often be my downfall, but it also allows me to be driven. It allows me to get to spaces that other people don't work to get to, because of that. And so through talking and through doing some introspection that can happen in therapy or, outside of therapy, it just allows you to not fracture yourself, because we can't walk around as fractured beings. That literally will drive you to things that aren't healthy. And so if you are walking around as a full integrated person, a full integrated being, and I show up as all of myself in a space, and it just allows you to be more authentic and more genuine. You then start to build authentic and genuine relationships. And so it's just that process of therapy and mental health that I think if we don't really dive into it, we really rob ourselves of it.
Know thyself.
Know thyself.
And then
all the parts.
Yeah. And then after that, the next step is that, we get these patterns in our life that we're kind of just repeating on autopilot. So even after we see things, making that day-to-day change. And that's where I think having somebody like you that's actually can be an objective observer who can then, tell us what you're seeing, because we don't have that for ourselves. And then, teaching us tools that we can use.
Yeah, those patterns are the hardest part, right?
Oh my God. You don't even know you're doing it. It's autopilot. If you insult me, I am going to hurt your feelings. It is that's how it goes. And
but
then you just
survival. Yeah,
right,
it's survival, right? Or it's what we believe to be survival. It's what our
at
brain
least a
tells
learned
us is
behavior
survival.
at some point. Yeah.
Exactly. Most of the things we do are learned. And so the great thing about learning behaviors that can be destructive is that you can unlearn them, you can replace them. Preach. And so it really is about noticing those patterns. Like you definitely hit that on the head right there. It's like the behaviors that we do, because it's one thing to know, it's like, the first step is acknowledgement. But then after that, it's like, well, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
And and that's the work that comes in therapy of the, what are you going to do about it? Like,
and you got to fail.
You come in.
You got to be okay with that. Try again. Like that's
absolutely. I have a podcast all about failure, a second podcast, The Audacity to Fail, which talks a lot about failure. And it's inevitable. It's a part of life. But, you get to fail forward. You're going to fail when you try to make these changes. And you're going to fail again and again. But each and every time you are learning what not to do and how to persist and do things differently.
Well, I have a quick question about some of the dirty side of the industry of psychology and psychiatry. And I know you got into a little bit earlier talking about the insurance companies. And one of my big things is always access, right? Because this is a great tool, but it's not always accessible to people, either depending on economics or location. And I know that with the advent of online therapy, it has helped with some of the access dealing with, distance and getting to a location. But the cost of therapy keeps a lot of people outside looking in. Could you talk a little bit about that? And then also if you have any ways, or if you know some things that do help with those costs, any suggestions to help fix that issue, could you also expound on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that definitely is one of the hindrances. Access is a hindrance to so many things, and mental health, mental wellness, and therapy does not escape that. And so I often will say that when it comes to accessing therapy, first, see if there are resources in your area. I often tell people that you can definitely see if there are things or spaces or resources that are there. Because the honest truth is that there are some communities that don't have resources in their area. They don't have local resources. And then if you don't have those local resources, checking to see if there are some online resources that you are able to access. If you have a job, then you have access to mental health. So if if you are employed with insurance, I should say that if you have insurance on your job, you have access through your employee assistance program. So EAP, HR, and can help you access that. The thing with EAP though is that they are locally ran. So if you've been in one state and you've done EAP, it may look different in another state or another area. So you always want to make sure that you check with your HR department, check to see what your EAP package looks like. Usually there's about 5 to 6 sessions of EAP that you are already covered by. And so you want to check there. And EAP doesn't have to be face to face, especially with COVID. A lot of things have been virtual. So there's some virtual resources there. So if you do have a job with insurance, you do have access. A lot of people don't know that, right? And so they're like, I can't find anything, or I don't have the access. And you've got that resource there. If you don't have a job or you don't have insurance, then, checking to see other things that might be happening in your area. One, if you find a therapist that you really feel like you've connected with. So if you look through psychologytoday.com where you can resource therapists.
Great resource.
Yes, great resource. There's also a lot of different composites of therapists on different websites. Like Therapy for Black Girls has a resource list for therapists that you can search by state. So if you found one, you've read their profile online, you feel like you've connected with them, I often say give them a call. Usually therapists do a very brief 15 to 20 minute just open session where you can ask them questions. I often say interview your therapist. You can ask them questions, see if it's a good fit. It's important. Therapy is like trying on clothes. Just because it looks good on the rack does not mean it's going to fit you. You get it home and you're like, oh, those lights, I didn't like this.
It doesn't matter how skilled somebody is. If you're not comfortable in the room with them, then you're not going to open up to the fullest.
You're not going to open up. Exactly. And not every therapist is for everybody. So see if they offer like a free 20-minute or 15-minute just kind of session, get to know you, meet. And oftentimes they'll do that. And then during that session, you want to ask them if they do a sliding scale. So some therapists do a sliding scale where they charge based off of your income. They don't go through insurance. They don't charge their typical fee. All therapists do not do that. It is up to the decision of the therapist to do that. But some do that. So you just want to check and you want to ask. And if they don't, then ask them if they know someone who does. And sometimes they can refer you to other therapists, other psychologists who do. So you definitely want to do that. And you also want to check resources. Like I said, NAMI has open and free community engagements around mental health and mental therapy. So I've done a couple of NAMI groups. I know a couple of other therapists and other individuals who run NAMI groups as well. So it's still other ways that you can get mental health outside of the traditional therapy office. And that's the full purpose of everyday psychology, right? Because there are so many barriers, especially within the Black community, to access and being able to experience therapy. And so everyday psychology is all about pulling therapy outside of the 4 office walls, or pulling mental health outside of the 4 office walls, and talking to communities, talking to organizations, and doing a lot of education that can help people become well without always having that hefty therapy bill or your insurance that says you've reached your sessions, we're not going to pay anymore. All of those different things that can happen when we run into barriers out there.
Let me throw one more out there for everybody.
Yes.
Vocational rehab is a state agency it's one of these, the conservatives in South Carolina love these little bootstrap help yourself up stuff, but let's use them. And if you have any kind of mental health situation that would be impacting your work, your ability to work, your ability to retain a job, you can contact Vocational Rehab of South Carolina, and there are, depending on the situation, you can get a number of therapy sessions that the state pays for.
That's perfect. Wow. That's awesome.
That's good information.
I'm going to add that to my list of resources.
Yeah, and that's no insurance required. That's you can if you could have lost your job because of a mental health situation and are not sure if you can start another one, and that's what this program is basically for, is to help people be able to continue working.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, this is something we always like to ask folks, especially something for millennials to think about. It's important for everybody, but time management. and work-life balance. And of course, this is something, of course, as a person who works in the self-care field, just making sure that you can walk away from everything once you clock out, making sure that you don't have to take things home, that so you can properly recharge and have energy so you can also have great mental health. How have you dealt with this challenge, and what are some things that you do to maintain that balance?
Yeah, that's a great question and a very important question. At the beginning of my career, I struggled a lot with balancing and self care. I would get so wrapped up in the lived experiences of others, and it just made it really hard to return to my own reality. But I realized that I was really robbing myself of being the best psychologist or the best healer I could be by getting so wrapped up in that. And so it was really imperative that I had to work really hard to maintain balance. And I had a supervisor during one of my training experiences that actually had to assign me self care. Like, he was like,
Wow.
I know you're a rule follower. You're going to do this if I make it an assignment. And literally had to assign self care that I had to report out on to him every week, which I think was it was life changing for me, because I thought I was doing self care and balancing by like, oh, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to walk instead of taking the train. And it's like, well, you're going there anyway. Is that really self-care? Because you're going to do work when you get there. So it's like intentional self-care. Like, what are some things that you can intentionally do to maintain balance in your life? And so a lot of things that I practice now make balance a little bit more manageable. It doesn't make it easier. It just makes it more manageable. Things like, I really try to be kind to myself and allow for mistakes. Okay. So I do that by understanding that when I do make mistakes, I've said that, before, that it is a way to fail forward. It's not a detriment. It's not a failure that is terminal. There is a way that I can learn through my missteps. And so I often talk about my mistakes in a way of balancing them out, because my brain automatically goes to, oh, you did the horrible thing. How could you mess up? And so talking about it helps to balance out, to say, like, what can you learn? What lessons did you move through? I engage in activities that make me feel effective, not just make me feel good. So things that made me feel good were like I said, oh, I'm just going to take a long shower. That makes me feel good. Yeah. But how effective does that make me feel when now I can't work out because I spent 30 minutes in the shower, like conditioning my hair, so I do things that make me feel effective. So that could look like working out, but that could also look like making sure to pay my bills on time, So those things make me feel effective. They make me feel strong. They make me feel adult-ish, all of those things. So I try to engage in those things that make me feel effective. I really try to keep a realistic mindset. So I think about difficult things that I've conquered in the past, because life is hard, like balance is difficult. Dealing with all of these things. We have so many hats that we wear at all times. And sometimes your brain tells you that you can't do it, but I keep a realistic mindset. I think about things that I've done in the past that have been hard, but I was able to do. And I do that. I say a mantra of, I've done hard things, I can do hard things. And it really does help me be realistic in what I can and can't carry. And then I also say no, which has been historically difficult for me.
There. That's a gem.
But I say no, and I put a period at the end. Like, I don't explain. I don't say maybe. No, yeah, there's no comma. There's no. And I often try to resource people with things, like I said at the very beginning, instead of trying to be, I allow myself to not be the expert. So I'm not the only person. Like, I don't have the juice, and that's okay. I don't need all the juice. Like, I give it to other people, and I say, like, no, I can't do this for you right now, but maybe so-and-so can, or let me point you to another resource, or let me give you something that can help you do this for yourself. So that's something that helps me keep balance a lot these days, saying no to others, but more importantly, saying no to myself at times when I just want to do the most with the least.
You have boundaries for others and for yourself.
Absolutely. The boundaries should start with yourself. In order to keep the whole boundaries with others, for others, you have to have boundaries for yourself. So I tell people that all the time. Like when you are setting boundaries with other people, what you're actually doing is setting boundaries with yourself, because those other people engaged with you in a way that you allowed, and in a way that I'm not going to say a way you allowed, a way that you created space for them to do so. Right. And so if I am constantly finding that my family members are piling on me, instead of just saying to them, I want you to stop doing that, then I also need to say to myself, how can I make sure that I don't create space for that to happen? So how can I say no when I really want to help and give this money this time, but I know I don't have it. So how can I make sure that I don't overextend myself and then experience resentment because they keep coming, right? So the only being that we can control is ourselves. And so setting boundaries always starts with yourself, and then it starts to move into those other relationships.
You're an Aquarian, ain't it?
I'm a Cancer.
Are you really?
Cancer.
Me too.
I am.
You got some Aquarian somewhere in your chart. You got
that is so funny. I actually get along very well with Aquarian women. Aquarian men, though, we have our issues. They're a little too wishy-washy for me.
Well, yeah, they say Cancers and Aquarians, but I'm an Aquarian moon and a Cancer sun. My wife's an Aquarian.
Oh,
somehow we work it out.
You work it out. No, yes, I'm a Cancer sun sign, a Cancer sun sign. And so saying no is hard because I want to, care and mother everybody.
Yeah. It's for a different reason for us. We just got to pour everything we got out for everybody to just have.
But before we go to the next question, Shari, can you talk about, meditation? Because I know I did a guided meditation with you a couple of weeks ago. And I loved it. So just
absolutely
explain a little bit more about that being in your work-life balance.
I absolutely love meditation. I do meditations, a group meditation every Saturday. So I did one right before this recording. And meditation is a huge part of how I pull away from the things that I carry in my mind. So when you talk about balance and you talk about leaving the stories of others behind, when you talk about, because you get so much of that in therapy, meditation allows me to center myself and to come from all of the static that happens, the white noise, the pink noise that happens in our lives. So I practice meditation quite often. And meditation practice is a little bit different than just doing a couple meditations here and there. I practice daily mindfulness, which allows, my practice is mindfulness, and I do that through meditation. And so it's about daily, like you said, just finding
it's the only way you can really feel the difference. If you do it daily for a few weeks, you'll be like, oh, well, there I go. That's all I need to do.
You experience it. Exactly. It's just that experience of going within yourself in order to find peace and joy, and also dive into difficult things. So I do really quick meditations for people. I help people kind of start their practice with meditation. I help guide people through that practice. It really does help with decreasing anxiety. It slows down your heart. It really allows for your mind to slow down. So it has these physical effects. And what it really does is it tricks your brain into thinking that you're in a sleeping state, basically. So when we're asleep, our body just kind of slows down and kind of regenerates itself, which is why sleep is so important. But it allows your body to do that in an awake state or in a conscious state. And so meditation is a huge part of my balancing practice. And I tell people all the time, if you're interested in trying out meditation, there's so many different ways that you can do that. If you don't have somebody to help guide you through it, you can always use the Calm app. They have a free version. You don't have to pay for it. You can find free meditations online. Our podcast, 3 Seconds and a Mic, we do meditation series annually. So we have a 3-part meditation series that's already there. We're actually in the middle of a 3-part meditation series right now. And it's all about being mindful of your body, being mindful of what's around you, and slowing down. We don't slow down in this society. And so it just gives you the space to do that.
Man, that's bad. That's dope, man. I know there was a study that the CIA has done in the past about meditation and mindfulness and using it as a way to trigger healing in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very interesting study. They did this over a course of probably 10 to 20 years. This is how it was a long form study. And it showed that people who are extremely adept or skilled at meditation, they can get the same effects of healing that you get, like you were saying, from sleep.
Yeah.
But while being awake, and it almost as if it supercharges it. So it speeds up that healing process because they're actually awake. I just thought that was a really interesting thing, especially the fact they just talked about that in that sense that it is not like kooky science or anything like that. It's an actual thing that has been proven to be effective.
It's a mind hack. We learn that there are things we can do that can, I mean, if you think about it, your brain is the greatest chemical factory in the world. Everything that you experience, all the joys, all the pains, all of that comes from a chemical inside your brain being released at the right moment. And if you can gain control over that and you can trigger these things when you need them to, and meditation and yoga is the path to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I don't want to geek out about it, but it's all about your nervous
Go ahead, geek
system.
out.
Oh yeah, look, we are the geekiest people.
That's what we're here for. You know what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's all about so your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, and you have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system often sympathizes with what's happening around you. So it sympathizes with pain, it sympathizes with fear, and it really revs up your body. So when there is anxiety or panic or worry that's happening, your sympathetic nervous system is active, and it really starts to say oh my goodness, let me make sure that I have enough blood flowing, I have enough oxygen in my system, that fight or flight response that we talk about, it really kicks that on, and it says, hey, I need you to rev up. And so your body revs up and your breathing shortens. And that's kind of the key point with meditation. So your breathing is shortened, which means you're getting more blood flow, you're getting more oxygen in your blood, your heart's pumping faster, and your body can exist in that state, but it's not supposed to exist in that state long term. But when we experience daily stressors that kick in that nervous system, it overwhelms our system, which is why a heart attack happens, or we gain weight because our digestion system changes. But when you start to enact that other part of your nervous system, the parasympathetic, it's like a parachute, so it comes down with the calmness, right? So it allows your heart to slow down. It allows your breathing to slow. So when you're meditating, you're slowing your breathing. You're really focusing in on your breathing, which helps your body say, oh, we're safe. So we don't need to kick into high gear. So my heart rate can slow, my brain can slow down, my body can go into this state of regeneration because we're not in danger. So that fight or flight response kicks off. And so that's why meditation is really healing for your body. And the practice of meditation is something that allows for your body to start to learn. It's kind of like when you go to the gym and you work out certain muscles. If you skip leg day, then your legs start to atrophy, right? If you skip really nourishing that parasympathetic nervous system, it starts to atrophy. And so it's really hard to get into a calm state. So day-to-day practice is like day-to-day leg day, right? So it really strengthens that part of your nervous system and allows for your heart and your brain and your body and your digestion system and all of those things to operate at a slower, more healthy pace. So that's my little geek moment, but a little bit of lesson for why it's important and why it's helpful. Has nothing to do with, it can have things to do with religion, but I hear a lot of people saying, I don't do that because I'm Christian, and that doesn't line up with what I do. Or, I've heard a lot of just misconstrued things about spirituality and meditation. It can be spiritual, but it isn't always.
It has a very practical use. It's like saying, I will not drink this type of water. Because I don't like how it tastes. It's just a tool. It's just a tool. I always try to explain that to people. Yeah.
Well, and I think, ideally, if you are a spiritual person, then everything is spiritual. you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
well, that's a huge discussion, but yeah, any damn
No,
way.
but that's true.
We can jump off that cliff
No.
if we want.
We'll do
That
a
is very
yoga
true.
episode later on. But
Yeah.
Yes, please. Let's do it.
Can I get really friggin' weird? Can we do that one day? I'd love to.
Yes.
Yeah, we can do that.
That'd be dope.
Excellent. Well, I guess that leads you actually already started talking about this, but you started in, it was September 2019. You and two of your colleagues, you all launched the 3 Psychs and a Mic podcast. Yeah, man. Could you talk to our audience a little bit about that podcast? And I guess the big thing is whenever you do or create content based on a profession that you're in, people think that you're just going to, boom, shoot right off, be ready to roll, that you don't have to prep much for it because you're a natural. Like they say, it's like if Michael Jordan talking about basketball on a podcast, you would guess it'd be the best. So could you talk to our audience about your podcast, what you all talk about, and then how much prep and preparation do you do getting ready for the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So 3 Psychs and a Mic was a brainchild of mine because the crazy thing about all of my friends is that most of them are therapists, which, is pros and cons to that. And we would have these really cool conversations like we just did about like the parasympathetic nervous system and like, why it's important to do meditation and all of this stuff. And we connected to like a Lil Wayne story that we read in the news or something crazy.
Oh, wow.
And we were like, you know what? I think this would be really cool for people to hear for a number of reasons. 1, education. That's always a stand. But 2, for them to realize that psychology isn't just like old stuffy white men in a room. Like you're not laying on the couch. Like it's cool and it can be cool. And, just give people this idea that, psychology is accessible and it's this far reaching thing. So we decided to start that podcast and I had it in my mind for a very, very long time. And one event, I did a panel with Charlie Penn, who is a former editor at Essence. She just recently left and she had a podcast called Yes Girl. And I was on a panel with her and I told her about this podcast and she was like, you should just do it. Like, just hit record. And one Saturday I was like, you know what, y'all, we were just sitting over here, like you said, 2019 pre-COVID. So we were like, let's just record an episode around why Black people don't go to therapy. And that was our first episode titled Black People Don't Do Therapy. And we just talked a little bit about just the importance of, well, 1, why Black people don't do therapy, why it's important for Black people to do therapy, and like how to knock down some of those stigmas that we carry in our community around therapy. And so ever since then, we've been recording. At first, we started recording weekly episodes, but I'll move into how much work that is.
Yeah.
And so now we record
right?
bi-weekly episodes. It's a lot of work. Our episodes are really about just the whole wide range of human experience. So we, of course, talk a little bit about the scientific part of psychology. So we have episodes on depression, anxiety, medication, because people often have misconceptions about medication to help with managing mental health. We have episodes on suicide, episodes on sex and therapy, and like all of these different things. But we also have episodes on insecure and friendships and how to, when Molly and Issa were going through their thing, like how to deal with a friendship breakup and all of these different things that are a part of the full experience. We have a really cool episode with 2 of our colleagues, 2 Black male psychologists, called Toxic Masculinity and What Is That? And so we're talking about just
Fun.
The experience of being human and
digging into it, not its existence.
Yeah, right. I'm glad you made that distinction.
Toxic masculinity is the best.
No.
But they had it's really interesting.
Man.
They had some really cool ideas around toxic masculinity that pushed us as women a little bit, so that was a really fun episode. A lot of banter. But, so we have upwards of almost 100 episodes now. We've been doing it for the last
bravo.
3 years.
Oh wow, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so we've been doing it for a while. They are amazing psychologists in their own right, and it's been a lot of fun. But on the flip side of that, it is a lot of work. So we don't just get on and talk. I think people have that misconception of podcasts that you just get on and you're just like, let's just talk.
Exactly.
We don't do that. We do a lot of prep. We do a lot of research. We really want to make sure that we give people information that they can use. Just because we're psychologists doesn't mean that we have expertise in all areas of psychology. We all work in different fields or different parts of psychology. So we have different expertise, and we really make sure that we bring guests that can bring different expertise as well. But we make it fun. It's not like a lesson. You're not in class. We don't look at it as though you're in class. We really want it to be like the right, the cool kids in psychology. So that's something that's really fun. It's a really cool part of, like I said, bringing psychology into the community. We give a lot of lessons and recommendations that allow for people to gain without having to pay us. We don't charge therapy bills after that.
That's really dope.
Yeah.
I know I've listened to a couple episodes. I'm on like episode 11, and I just love that. I feel like you guys are like my girlfriends. I'm listening to you, but I've met you guys personally. So I really enjoy the connection from being on the audio and then meeting you in real life. But I do have a really quick question someone brought to me. So you said a lot of your friends are in the same field, but who do you guys speak to? Do you guys have therapists or?
Yeah, absolutely. I have like my therapist is on speed dial. I'm like, yo, I need to talk to you. So my main therapist is still in Minnesota, which I am so grateful for them working with me out of state. Love them. They're more of a mentor now since we have licensing laws in different states and things like that. So we don't do formal therapy, but we each have therapists. I'm not going to give their business away, but I certainly have a therapist. I certainly have a therapist that I go to mostly for maintenance at this point. And I say that because there are times where you may not need a therapist, and there are times where you actually do need a therapist. And the cool thing about having friends that are therapists and just having friends in general, there have been moments where they've been like, Shari, you think you might need to go to therapy? And, like we said, we don't see things. We need people to point those things out. And I'm like, you know what? I probably should, and even as a psychologist, there are moments where I miss it. And friends are like, yeah, you probably need to go to a therapist right now. But yeah, I am one of those people who don't preach what I don't do. And so I certainly say that my therapist has been a lifesaver for many, many times. And I say that with all honesty, but it's more for maintenance when I need to go, as opposed to moments that I've had to go. So I like to make that distinction that you should always have a therapist somewhere.
That's another thing that we don't see in the TV version of therapy is that it's not like you go once a week forever. You go to accomplish a goal and then reevaluate if there's something else that needs to be handled. But really, you should be learning these abilities to do it for yourself.
Yes, I often say my job is to put myself out of business. Like, I don't want people to be sick, I really want people to be healed and to be able to move on their own. So yeah, that's key.
Now, how important do you think it is to have a therapist that can relate to you, like a person of color, or do you think that really defines the type of impact you get during the session? I saw that on a recent, I think it was Taraji P. Henson's Peace of Mind podcast or show she has on Facebook. And they were talking about how you should find someone that can relate to you or is relatable.
Yeah, I think, again, yes and no, because of the reality, right? So I get a lot of people who will contact me because I specifically, the work that I do, I don't do individual therapy at this time. I am more, like you said, like consulting. I work with community groups, organizations, that type of thing. And so I get people coming to me all the time and saying like, hey, I know you're not doing therapy. Do you have someone that you can refer me to? And I'll say, yeah, sure. And then I'll ask them, what are your preferences, right? Because I do think that's important. And so sometimes people say, oh, I want a psychologist, I want a Black woman, and I want face-to-face. And they'll be here in Columbia, and I'll say, well, there are no Black psychologists that are women that are doing work in private practice, which is greatly unfortunate.
So if you're looking for a career out there,
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you are looking for a career, we need Black women who are doing therapy. And I say in private practice because there are Black women who are psychologists in Columbia, but they work for institutions, right? So there are Black women who are psychologists that work for the VA, but you have to be a veteran. Or there are Black women that are psychologists that work for the University of South Carolina, but you have to be a student. So there are certain things that, like, if you want to just go into somebody's community office, there aren't any Black psychologists. If you're open to like a LPC or a marriage and family therapist or something like that, then we may have a little bit more work to do or more to work with so we can find you someone. So there are limitations. You may be in a space that you don't have access to someone who doesn't look like you. You don't want that to be the hindrance for why you don't go to therapy, right? So I say, if you are in a space where you can find somebody that looks like you, great. You can try them out. But again, just because I look like you doesn't mean I'm going to connect with you or you're going to connect with me. So I tell people all the time to do that intro phone call to see if you connect with people. Give therapists 3 sessions, 3 to 5. Well, I'll say 3. Give therapists 3 sessions, see if you connect with them. If you don't, it's okay to fire your therapist. We understand if you say, I just really don't feel the connection and I don't think that I can be able to make the progress that I'd like to make in our relationship. Can you refer me to someone else? And usually therapists, we don't take it personal. We're like, yeah, because we really truly do want you to be able to progress and to get to healing. So the good side is, yes, if you can find somebody who looks like you and you relate to and that you connect with, that's great. If you can't, don't let that be your barrier. And just because I've been through what you've been through doesn't mean I can tell you how to do it, So if you're looking for someone who has experienced exactly what you've experienced, then sometimes that isn't going to be the best match. I don't have children, but I can certainly talk to parents around self-care and how to set boundaries and how to balance and things like that. And so I think being open-minded to understanding that you might get a therapist that you love, that in a million years, you're like, I would probably never talk to this person if I passed them on the street, but they're an amazing therapist, And so don't close off walls just because you don't see yourself on the other side.
Good advice. Good advice.
Long
I
answer
think
to
that can be a hindrance. No, it was great advice because I know, especially like you said, we were talking about access earlier in the conversation, and part of access issues for some people, like you said, is just not feeling as if, based on who the person is, if they don't look like them or etc., they make that prejudgment that they won't be comfortable. But I love the advice that you gave of interviewing your provider and making sure that they're going to be able to, that's the smartest thing ever. And no one ever explains that.
It's like, I work for you.
And Psychology Today has almost like a Facebook or a LinkedIn kind of thing where you can kind of check out your therapist ahead of time. That's
dope.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you get to see like what their like treatment style is. So it's always like with therapy, you want to find someone who treats what you're experiencing. Everyone isn't an expert in everything. So you may have therapists that don't work with trauma, or you may have therapists that don't work with certain things, or, they aren't I don't want to say they aren't an expert in it. They haven't fully trained in how to work in that. Because if you think about the human experience, there's so many different intricacies, right?
Who you telling?
So we're not expected to know how to work with everything, jack of all trades, master of none. So we don't want that. You want to find a therapist that is knowledgeable about what you're experiencing. And in that interview, you can ask them questions like, have you ever worked with someone who's experiencing what I'm going through? How difficult is it for you to sit in a space where I might be talking about trauma, and hear what they say? Listen to what they say. They work for you. And so you want to hire someone who is going to fit what you need. And if you start and you think they might, and then you find out that they don't, I'm saying, fire them.
I like how you say that. Fire them. It's like you're breaking up with somebody. Nope, I don't want this relationship.
Exactly.
But like you said, that usually is not a problem.
Yeah, it's usually not a problem. And, I've walked a couple of friends through firing their therapist. And of course, you don't want to no-show, and because then you get no-show fees and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But you can have a conversation, and it's a hard conversation to have, but you can have a conversation with your therapist around feeling as though it's not a good fit. And oftentimes they will understand and help you walk into your next therapist, because we don't want people to say, well, I went to one therapist, it wasn't working, so now I don't do therapy anymore.
I give up on all.
Yeah. That's not helpful for anyone.
Oh, wow. Man. Well, man, this is an excellent conversation, man. You are extremely knowledgeable and sharp, and you have a calming presence. You made the conversation smooth, man.
This has been fun.
Yeah, likewise. And I must ask, because of course we're getting to that point where we're about to get ready to wrap up. We always ask, what projects are you currently working on? And also, of course, how can we locate you online or on social media?
Yeah. I always have some things in the work, always doing something. Recently, I've been writing quite a bit, some hopes of releasing something soon related to community and organizational trauma. So hopefully doing a little bit of that. I'm always taking coaching clients, executive coaching clients, teaching mental wellness throughout the community. I've got some upcoming sessions with Blue Cross Blue Shield, original origins of health and wellness. I'm always doing work at Aspire Wellness. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Everyday Psychology LLC. And my website is www.drsharinicole.com. And that's where you can read all that you want about me. You can listen to the podcast there. You can read blogs there. You can read about everyday psychology. You can contact me through that site. And if you're interested in hearing more from me, that's the best way to connect with me there.
Excellent. Well, before we get out of here today, any other questions or anything for the guests from the panel?
Nope, you did a great job. Thank you. You said in the background, you calmed his daughter down.
Oh, very nice.
Your voice, that voice.
That's hilarious. Look, I'm glad that I am a psychologist. I was like, if I wasn't a psychologist, then I could be, a different type of operator on the phone. I'm gonna say,
but I'm gonna play this back today.
No, you'll be surprised. I've had, when I do meditations with clients, I've had them say, can I record your voice? And I'm like, that's a little weird, but maybe we can work something out.
Listen, during the guided meditation I did with you a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I wonder if I should record her. Would she feel offended? But I was like, no, let me just enjoy the experience. Maybe next time I can slip a recording in there, because your voice really is calming.
Well, thank you. Yes. It's in the moment. It's about being
audiobooks.
Oh yeah, now that would be dope. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, man, this is an excellent interview today. We want to thank our guest, Dr. Shari Dade, for joining us today on the Hilltop Glove podcast. Man, before we get out of here, I always like to tell people, man, have a great, peaceful weekend. Give out love and gratitude to those people around you who you care about and who care about you. And yes, please do, especially right now in this day and age and the stuff we're dealing with right now. And with that said, man, everybody have a peaceful, prosperous upcoming week. Thank you for joining us. This is Onward signing out. Yeah, man. DJ N What right here. We got Tamaya, Mike. We got the whole gang today. It's Skip in the background. Thank you, Dr. Dade, and we will see you all on the next episode of the Hilltop Glove Podcast. Peace.
That's it for today's episode of the Hilltop Glove Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms. Also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Hilltop Glove.